All right, let's dive right into Hermann Hesse's classic, Damion. In this explainer, we're going to zero in on one incredibly profound theme from the text, the painful but entirely universal transition from childhood innocence into young adulthood. It's this messy period of psychological death and rebirth that literally every single one of us has to navigate. But before we unpack the text, I want you to really think about this for a second. What actually happens when the comfortable, safe world of your childhood just completely shatters around you? Because today, we're exploring those incredibly lonely, alienating moments of growing up that literally change who we are at our core. Section 1, The Bully and the Savior. We start off in protagonist Emil Sinclair's early teenage years, which is a time totally dominated by this relentless tormentor named Franz Kromer. Sinclair is stuck in what's basically a living hell. We're not talking about some minor playground spat here. He's trapped in a profound bully dynamic, a prolonged state of blackmail and humiliation forced on someone who's totally vulnerable. He's forced to do terrible things at Kromer's bidding, and it's so traumatizing, so deeply humiliating, that it completely consumes his life, totally blocking out the light of his childhood. You know, the source text actually brings up a really personal reflection on this, specifically about 6th grade bullying. It notes that the pain of being singled out for torment hurts far worse than any discipline from a parent. It's a great reminder that these emotional scars, they can last a lifetime. It leaves us wondering, even years later, whatever happened to the kids who tormented us? It just makes Sinclair's desperation feel incredibly relatable. So Sinclair's torment only ends when a mysterious kid named Damion steps in and saves him. But here's the catch, it's not pure relief. Instead of total comfort, this new relationship creates a subtle but persistent tension. Why? Well, Sinclair realizes pretty quickly that Damion operates completely outside of conventional Christian common sense. Damion has this high intellect and these firm, unconventional convictions that make Sinclair really uneasy, even as he's super grateful. Section 2, Rejecting Empty Chatter. This unease really peaks as they approach their church confirmation, a huge rite of passage, and Sinclair finds himself just profoundly distracted. There's this intense mental tug-of-war happening inside Sinclair during religious instruction. On one side, you've got the traditional teachings, the pastor desperately trying to convey the solemnity of the Last Supper to the community. But on the other side, Sinclair's mind is completely wandering over to Damion's new realm, this individualistic order and world of the soul that Damion seems to represent. So the crucial takeaway here is Damion's intense, defining philosophy on communication. During one of these classes, Damion basically states that talking just for the sake of empty banter is actually a sin. Trait talk has zero value because it distances you from your own inner self. To Damion, the ultimate goal is to retreat inward, to crawl completely inside oneself, like a tortoise, just shutting out the meaningless noise of the outside world. Section 3. The Statue, Damion's Trance. Let's look at how this builds into what Sinclair calls literally the most memorable moment of his entire adolescence, which happens right before class begins. Sinclair is sitting next to Damion, watching in absolute terror as his friend basically transforms physically. First, his eyes are open, but they're gazing entirely inward. Then he goes completely motionless. His face turns pale and rigid, like carved stone or wood. Yet, right beneath this cold, marble-like exterior, Sinclair can sense this incomparable, intense inner vitality. The sensory detail here is just wild. Picture this, in a hot, silent room, charged with intense energy. A fly lands directly on Demion's forehead and slowly crawls down to his lips. And Demion? He doesn't twitch a single muscle. He is completely unreachable. He's totally immersed in his own inner being and entirely detached from the physical world. Sinclair is just paralyzed by this terrifying realization. The kid he had been chatting and walking with was just playing a role. This frozen, stone-like figure sitting next to him, that's the true Damion. Sinclair feels this profound, crushing loneliness wash over him, and he's desperately wondering where his friend's mind has gone. Is he in heaven? Is he in hell? The sheer distance between their minds at this exact moment feels wider than the most remote island on Earth. Section 4. A Shattered Childhood. After class, Demian snaps back to normal. But for Sinclair, the damage is done. He is forever changed, and his childhood is completely shattering around him. His new reality is honestly pretty tragic. Everything familiar suddenly feels distorted, dry, and totally unappealing. He's hit with this deep sense of alienation. His parents are looking at him with bewildered expressions. His sisters feel entirely estranged. Even his go-to comforts lose their magic. Books are suddenly just mere pieces of paper. And music, it's nothing but irritating noise. He is entirely isolated. I love how the text explains this. Think of Sinclair's mental state like a tree in autumn. He feels emotionally dead and numb to the world, sure, but his soul hasn't actually died. Just like a tree losing its leaves to the frost, his inner life is simply retreating to its deepest core to survive the cold. It's just a vital, necessary time of waiting to be reborn. Section 5. A New World Awakens. This quiet waiting period finally breaks when vacation ends, marking the moment Sinclair officially leaves home, like a bird leaving its nest. Things move pretty fast from here. Within days, he separates from his mother's gentle farewell, and with Damion away traveling, Sinclair is truly on his own. Weeks later, he moves into a boarding house in a new town, and in the months that follow, he meets an older student named Alfons Beck. Through Beck, Sinclair experiences the liberating, boundary-breaking taste of alcohol for the very first time. Fueled by the wine, all that suppressed inner turmoil finally just erupts. He passionately breaks away from the dogma he was raised with. So instead of accepting the traditional Christian teaching that the biblical Cain is simply evil for killing his brother Abel, Sinclair vehemently argues a totally different perspective. He actually defends Cain as a figure of unique, powerful spiritual strength. He is finally giving voice to those unconventional ideas Damion planted in his head years ago. This right here marks his complete, undeniable birth into young adulthood. It's not just an intellectual rebellion either. This phase naturally brings the awakening of adolescent sexuality. Through Beck's stories and his own internal shifts, this newfound curiosity about women emerges. The shattering of his childhood is complete, and a messy, complex, independent new world is taking its place. Sinclair's journey shows us that growing up is a painful, lonely, tearing away from everything we know and love. But as we've seen throughout this explainer, that destruction is absolutely crucial to finding our true, authentic selves. So I'll leave you with this final thought. When the safety and comfort of your own childhood inevitably ends and you are forced to look inward, what kind of world will your inner soul awaken to?